Welcome to Family Health by Mini First Aid. Mini First Aid are the UK's leading family first aid provider, and we are delighted to bring our latest podcast series to you, giving you all the information that you need around family health subjects. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the Family Health Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Unity Mutual, a trusted partner for your savings and investments and partner that understands your commitment to your child's health and financial future. When you choose Unity Mutual for a junior individual savings account, you secure your child's savings journey and receive a free mini first aid class. But it's not just about caring for their health, it's also about setting them up for a brighter future. Unity Mutual believes in enriching lives beyond pounds and pence, empowering you with both financial stability and life-enhancing opportunities. Let's dive in. Hello, I'm Kate and I am the founder of Mini First Aid. Welcome to our podcast, Family Health by Mini First Aid. And I'm thrilled that you've decided to join us for our latest instalment of our Family Health podcast, where we will continue to bring you top family health advice. So I've got a very special guest today. In fact, it's one of our Mini First Aid team, Charlotte Adamovich. Charlotte, welcome. Charlotte works in our head office, but we're talking to Charlotte today because Charlotte suffers from endometriosis, which is a chronic gynecological condition that affects a whopping 1.5 million women in the UK. I didn't know that, and I'm sorry, Charlotte, that I didn't know that.
Not many people do.
1 in 10 of us who are of a reproductive age are suffering with this condition. That is absolutely mega. Charlotte, thank you for giving up your time to come and talk to us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Charlotte. I work for Mini First Aid, as you've already said. So I write the blogs, which I love doing, and I do the customer newsletter, and I really enjoy working for the business. At home, I've got my husband and my daughter, who is 12 going on about 18. So that's an interesting time personally. But it's lovely as well. I love being a mum.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think when we were talking about all things family health, and in particular for this podcast, we talk about bringing subjects to our listeners that are things that we might Google or we might look up. So it might be that a friend or a family member, or it might be yourself listening going, actually, I've just been, or the words endometriosis have just been floated with me, with my GP, and I want to know more. So there might be people listening, nodding, going, yeah, absolutely, I know what this is. But there will also be people that may have only vaguely heard of it. So can you explain what it is?
Yeah, it's not very well known. I mean, I think a lot of people know that you can get really painful periods, but actually endometriosis is something else, something that's more difficult to live with than just that. So I think we're sort of going back to GCSE biology a little bit. So obviously every month you grow a womb lining. And then when that breaks down and it sheds, that's what releases from your body as a period. But what happens when you've got endometriosis is those cells, they actually grow around other parts of your body. So those cells that form your womb lining might be growing, for example, around your ovaries, around your fallopian tubes. They might be growing on your bowel, on your bladder. And actually they're reacting in the same way that your menstrual tissue does. So it's building up, it's breaking down, it's bleeding, but there's nowhere for that blood to go because it doesn't exit your body. So it's actually almost creating sticky adhesions around those gynecological organs, and that's what can result in the pain, the inflammation and scarring, which can cause further problems like cysts. So you can see that it can...
Sounds horrendous.
Get really quite painful.
And when did you first wonder if this is what you had?
So I think sadly probably for my mum more than me at the time, it was from my very first period. So when I was just after my 13th is when I started. And the pain I experienced, my mum immediately knew this isn't right, this isn't normal. And she knew that because she'd had it herself. And she actually, one of her first things she said to me was that I was hoping this wouldn't happen to you, Shah. And this was because she'd lived with endometriosis, and ultimately it led to her having to have a full hysterectomy at 33.
Gosh.
Because of the level of pain that she had to live with. So she was really, really upset that obviously it looked like I might end up being on this same pathway as her.
So just talking about pain, because there will be many of us that experience period pain, cramps, needing to have relief from a hot water bottle.
Of course, yeah.
And some of us might have more chronic period pain that can be quite debilitating. What's the difference then between that level of pain and this for endometriosis?
Yeah, so I think the difference with endometriosis is it's obviously when you have your period, but it's also not when you have your period as well. So it can happen any time of the month. And I think that's the difficult thing to explain to other people. So often I'll say I've got period pain, but I haven't. I've got the pain that you get with endometriosis. So the difference is I think a lot of us would know what period pain feels like. So it builds and it diminishes, and it builds and it diminishes, and it can be quite crampy and not very pleasant. It can make you feel quite sick. Mine would be bad to the point where, particularly when I didn't have any treatment for it, when I was in my teenage years, I would have to leave school in a taxi because I couldn't get home. I couldn't stay at school because I needed to be laying down, otherwise I might faint. And I certainly couldn't walk home. And if I was attempting to walk around school at all, to the office to rest, I would be hobbling because the pain would be so bad.
And how old were you when this was happening?
So this was right from the very first period.
So this is in your early teens?
Early teens, yeah. And so my mum would come to school and pick me up in a taxi because we didn't have another car.
So that's massive, because when you think about girls starting their periods, and that's quite a big thing because you've got these changes going on with your body, and never mind all the hormones. And for those of us with pre-teenage girls or teenage girls, we'll know that we're living that. And that can be quite difficult in itself because girls are getting used to their body doing something almost quite alien-like. But this just seems to be on a level. How on earth, as a teenage girl, did you manage that?
It was really hard. And I think the other side of it that made it even harder was the really heavy periods as well.
Right.
They were incredibly heavy. And I think if my mum hadn't experienced it, it would have been frightening. So I would have huge clots as well. And we're talking, size of a 50 pence piece.
Right.
And just the heaviness, meaning that it was embarrassing, realising in the middle of a lesson that you needed to go and change. So always having to have those spare supplies with you, spare clothes, not feeling you could be comfortable and confident when you had your period because you never knew whether that pain was going to come on, that really, really heavy bleeding. And it could be quite irregular, so it could sort of get you out of nowhere as well. So no, it wasn't a nice time then.
Can you remember how you managed it with the teachers? I mean, how does a teenage girl talk to their teacher about this issue?
I mean, that's what's difficult, because I think a lot of teachers would assume that with a normal level of period pain, you might be able to take some painkillers, and actually then you could sort of rejoin in with the school day. And that just didn't work for me. Once that pain had set in, and we got quite good at sort of me realising the pain, we started having to leave a lesson, having the painkillers almost immediately as the pain set in, because if I left it any length of time, that would be it. I'd be wiped out for the rest of the day. I'd have to be in bed, hot water bottles, couldn't carry on in school. And I think that was my mum at that stage was very concerned. Well, what's going to happen when it gets to exam time?
Yeah.
What's going to happen when it gets to GCSE time? Because you can't be trying to do an exam and feeling that level of pain.
So I guess you needed to seek diagnosis, right? And some of the stuff that I've read says that it can take sometimes on average eight years to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So how on earth do you go about getting a diagnosis?
So and just to sort of say here that I fully believe that statistic, because for me it was 24 years.
24 years?
Yeah. Before I got diagnosed. So
wow.
When you're younger, there's this feeling that you're going to get used to it. Your body's going to settle down. You'll start having normal periods. It'll all be okay. And this was very much sort of the message I was told right from the start. And obviously going to the doctors, you believe what they say, and you think that's going to be fine. So obviously persevered, for those first couple of years. But then it's getting to year 10, you get into your mock exams. We knew we needed to do something about it. So because there wasn't really that many, especially at that time, any set treatments for endometriosis, the best thing they could do was put me on the combined pill. So I was put on the pill at 14, and all of the sort of other side effects and repercussions that come with that. But it was better because I knew when my period was going to come. I didn't have that irregularity. It was nowhere near as heavy, and the pain it was still bad, but it was manageable.
Okay.
So I could take a dose of, if I'd woken up on the morning of my GCSE maths exam with it, I could take a dose of painkillers and get through it. So that was sort of the first steps with my treatment.
Talking painkillers, could you take normal, I say normal, but without having prescription painkillers? Were you able to take typical paracetamol on a normal dosage, or did you have to take something higher?
Yeah, well, I found for me that paracetamol didn't really do much, so ibuprofen worked better, and that's because it's more of an anti-inflammatory.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's some of the inflammatory things about endometriosis, which is what causes the pain. I have over the years been prescribed with heavier medications. I've always been a bit more nervous about taking them. What I found as the years have gone on works for me is if it's a particularly bad day, I will have a dose of ibuprofen and a dose of paracetamol.
Right.
Which obviously sometimes we're told to give our children, when they're particularly struggling and particularly poorly. And I found that will work for me in the way that just having one of those medications sometimes doesn't. But whilst, I have been prescribed heavier meds, I prefer to sort of take something that's more over the counter. It just feels a bit safer. And I think sometimes when I've taken heavy medication, the wooziness can be quite disconcerting as well. Take
me back then to this 24 years to be diagnosed, which I'm reeling out. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
How did you go about getting that diagnosis? How did you get it?
So as I said, at first it was quite dismissed. You'll grow out of it, and just sort of carried on with that. Got on the combined pill, and as I say, I think I've come to realise over the years I've tolerated a level of pain, and just sort of thought that that's okay. That's what I have to live with. So with the combined pill, it did reduce symptoms to a manageable level. I was still struggling. I was still in pain a lot, but I wasn't in pain to the extent that I had to crawl into bed. Mm-hmm. So I accepted that. And I probably should have pushed and realised that I needed more help. It's one of the later conversations I had with a doctor, and he said, where would you, this is one of the first times I'd had this conversation, where would you put your pain, Charlotte, on a scale of 1 to 10? And I'd said to him, I really don't know how to phrase that, because pain's subjective. It's, I've never had a limb cut off. It's period pain, it's endometriosis. How can it be that bad? So I was sort of saying, well, would I put it at a 7, at an 8? And I said, I've passed out with it. And the doctor went, if you have passed out with pain, that is a 10. Your body's passed out from that
reaction to pain.
It cannot cope with it anymore. So I think that was probably, and that was in my late 30s, that's probably the first time I realised that, I'd been dealing with something and just getting on with something that was really, quite unusual and shouldn't have been tolerated all the time. But so I'll go back to your question about the 24 years. So obviously I was on the combined pill for a long time, came off that to have my daughter. And that's something I should also mention, because endometriosis can lead to infertility, and I'm so lucky that mine hasn't. And I know there'll be people out there listening who it really sadly has affected. But it's also one of the things that went against me, because I was easily able to get pregnant and didn't have any trouble with that, and had a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. There was again that, it can't be endometriosis. Even though endometriosis is a whole range of symptoms, it's not just about infertility. So after I had Scarlett, went back to normal periods, what most people say of as normal periods, couldn't cope with the pain again. It was too bad. It was back to being a teenager again. So I had to go back on the pill to manage it. Mm-hmm. And it was only in my late 30s, sort of 20 plus years of being on the pill, I thought, I don't want to be on this level of, really
and hormones,
control. And I decided to myself, without consulting anyone, which is a little bit daft, decided to just come off it altogether and see how I was. I'd always been told as well, this was because I've been told by doctors over the years that this is likely to improve after you've had a child. This pain is likely to be better. And so I thought, well, I've had my baby, I've given it some time. Maybe I'll be all right, because that's...
Why do they think it might get better? Is that to do with hormone or what?
Hormonal changes,
right?
Situations over your life, and so again, I'd just sort of gone along with this, thinking this will get better as I grow older. This will get better after I've had a child, which is why I didn't sort of seek that to sort of really nail it down in terms of a diagnosis. But that year, so I was 36, and that year was the worst pain I've ever had with it. And this is where the other side of endometriosis that I haven't talked about so much comes in. Mm-hmm. So the pain I was getting between my periods was just ramping up.
Right.
And it was absolutely horrendous some days. So the pain I get mainly is concentrated around my ovaries.
Yeah.
And I've tried to describe it like to my husband, who's been incredibly patient and amazing throughout all of this, and we've known each other since we were teenagers. So he's been with me through all of this. And I remember him saying, "What does it feel like?" And I can honestly say the best way I can describe it is, it feels like someone is reaching into my pelvic area, around where your ovary is, and trying to pull it out. And that pulling, that tugging sensation, it just doesn't go. There's not a release from it. And it builds and it builds and it builds. And this is the pain that I have passed out with.
So if you were having it between your periods,
yeah,
what was your gap? What was your respite? Just days at this point?
Yeah, once I came off all hormonal control, I would have it probably, maybe 20 days of the month, some sort of pain with it. Not always the real intense pain. Sometimes it would be more a very uncomfortable bloating, which meant I couldn't wear certain clothes, at certain times. And that wasn't just obviously when my period was, I'm talking the whole month. But then maybe 5 days where it was this incredibly intense pain that was horrendous. And I think it came to a peak when it was our 10-year wedding anniversary when I was 37, and we'd gone away to a lovely hotel. And I spent the vast majority of the 48 hours in bed with a hot water bottle. And my husband found me at 2 a.m. in the morning on the tiled bathroom floor, like curled up like an animal.
Yeah.
Making this sort of keening noise.
Right.
Sorry, it makes me
sad. Yeah.
Because it was so painful.
Because it was so painful.
Yeah.
And at that point, when you're at that level of pain, is there any relief? Can you do anything to make it not when it's got bad?
No, not once. I've just got to hope that eventually I'll go to sleep, and then I'll wake up and it will have gone. But no, there's not really a release from it when it gets that bad.
So you're living with this. You're 37 years old. Mm-hmm. You have a daughter. You have a little girl. You have a life, and you've got to function. Yeah. How do you manage that? How do you come when it has reached its peak, and what's the next step? What do you do next?
Well, I think it was at that stage when it was affecting me that frequently that I knew I needed to do something about it. So, obviously it helps having lovely employers and people who are understanding around me, friends who know about this, know that I sometimes need to say no, and it might be very last minute as well that I need to say no. My daughter understanding what's going on, and poor thing, she's seen me on the floor when she was little, and she would bring me a blanket, and I'd just be like, "Mummy just needs to lie down." But as she got older, sort of understanding what that meant, she could, make me a hot water bottle. But ultimately, I couldn't carry on like that.
No, the mental impact must have been huge.
Yeah, huge, incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Because I love life. I like being busy. I'm not someone who sits down too much, but being forced to lie down, forced to sit down, forced to duck out of really lovely family occasions. I hate letting down people at work. So yeah, really struggled with that mentally as well.
Did you still find at this point that people were dismissive as it's just period pain, or were you beyond, or was it past that? Were people more understanding?
I think it was. I think it partly came from me, because I could be dismissive up to this point. I could be dismissive. I could be, it's just period pain, I'm getting on with it. And so some of that might have come from me, that sort of feeling that as women as well, I think you just crack on.
You motor on.
Yeah. So part of that I probably hold my hands up to. But yeah, by this stage, and my husband also saying, Shah, this can't continue. We need to finally get this pinned down, work out what's going on here.
So So where do you go? Do you go to the GP or do you have to go straight to a specialist? How does it work if you suspect this?
Back to the GP.
Yeah.
Explaining obviously your symptoms. You know, pointing out again that it isn't just about infertility. Again, you know, I realise that is a lot of people's story, and that's that must be far harder than anything I have coped with. But people understanding that endometriosis doesn't just mean infertility, you know. So putting that map of all those symptoms together that I had, I kept diaries as well because I wanted this time to go into the doctors and I wanted to be able to say, I've had it this many days this month.
Right.
I've struggled with it. I've been at a level of pain where I'm curled up on the floor, I'm crawling across the floor. I wanted to have that evidence this time. So going to the GP, and I think it really depends who you see sometimes. So if you don't see the right person the first time, go again. I luckily saw a lovely, lovely doctor at my old practice, and she straight away said, you should not be living with this. And so she referred me to gynecology.
Okay.
At my local hospital. I had to wait a bit for the appointment, but from the very first appointment that I went to, the doctor said to me, I am 99% sure that you have endometriosis and you have lived with endometriosis since you were in your early teens.
Wow. And
there was something, like, for me, really important about that validation of what I had and being told what I had. I felt like I could finally say to people, it's not just period pain. It's something, you know, a whole lot more than that.
Tell me a bit about, if you feel comfortable to, about what in the gynae unit, what they have to do to make their diagnosis.
Well, that's one of the difficult things. So you can't actually, I say I was validated by a diagnosis. You can't actually get 100% diagnosis of endometriosis without surgery, without them having a look at your insides.
Okay.
And I decided not to opt for that. So the only validation I have is that this doctor who's seen lots and lots of cases of endometriosis said, you have this, but without looking at your insides, without surgery, I can't tell you that definitively, but I know that is what you have. So there's lots of reasons I chose not to have surgery. So I was talked through the different routes that I can go down, a lot of which are hormonal, and the sort of other major route is surgery. The thing with surgery is that by that stage, I was describing extreme pain going to the toilet at both sides.
Right.
At certain times. This extreme pain in my ovary, particularly my right ovary. They thought the level of where my endometriosis had spread to over the years was too much for surgery.
Right.
Because when and it's still a very valid choice. People would still make that choice. People would have surgery, so I don't want to put people off that route. But for me, they said, if we went in, we'd be lots of different areas that we'd be having to deal with. You have got some risk with bladder and bowel.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, of trying to take these endometriosis growths off those areas, risk of perforation, risk of infection. And all the time going through my head while they're talking to me about this is, I've got a child. Mm-hmm. I've never had to have surgery. I'm really fortunate. But I was frightened to have surgery, and they felt that it might not be worth it anyway because they didn't think they could get rid of all of it successfully.
Did you find the doctor gave you a very balanced opinion, though? So you felt you could make that decision?
So, very much so. So I was talked through all of the different options. As I say, the hormonal options, the other options. I'm lucky as well in that I have a medic in the family, so I was able to talk to them about it. And also my mum's experience of having to have surgery. They actually went in to do a similar thing on her and ended up with a full hysterectomy
right.
because of the extent of how bad it had got. Obviously, I knew that wouldn't happen without my consent, but I probably had that bit of a fear from what had happened to my mum as well. But it was mainly the fact that they gave me a very balanced view, and they said, you can have surgery, it will alleviate your symptoms, but it may well come back.
Right.
And they said sometimes it can almost be worse to be better and then it come back. And I took everything, and I really considered everything with my husband as well. And we decided in the end not to have the surgery, which meant as well I couldn't get that formal sort of, yes, you have definitely got it because we've seen it. I think it's a little bit crazy that that's the only
way they can see it. I'm surprised that they can't look via a scan and say that.
Yeah. I've had scans over the years and they've revealed I've got cysts all over the place, but they can't tell you on a scan that you've got endometriosis.
Right.
So and I don't think there's that many illnesses that are like that where they would have to do.
So the only way is surgery.
Yeah.
So you opted out of surgery, and sounds like that was the right decision for you, and a balanced advice given to you by your doctor. Mm-hmm. What's the treatment then? What can you do, or what's your alleviation, or are you still living with this chronic pain?
So obviously I could have gone back on the combined pill, because that did alleviate my symptoms. I felt I'd been on it so long, and it's obviously a hormonal system that delivers to your entire body, so it can affect everything. So instead I opted for the Mirena coil. Yep. Which is a quite well-known treatment for heavy periods as well. So it sort of combated both of the problems I was having, the heavy periods as well as the...
And the Mirena coil has hormone connected within the coil itself,
So it's like a local hormone release as well. So they felt it would be a more appropriate treatment, and I felt better about that. The thing with the Mirena coil is it can take quite a long time to settle. I was fully informed of that. I was told it could well get worse before it gets better.
Right.
But obviously at this stage, I needed to do something about it. So made a decision to have it. And when it was actually implanted, for people who get really bad pain, useful to know to take someone with you because it can make you feel extremely faint. So getting back home from hospital afterwards, and I had to go to gynecology, to a clinic to get it implanted.
You couldn't have it at GP?
Just get it at your normal doctors, no, not with a history like mine. So taking someone with you is a really good tip. But I did get worse after I had it. And I'd like people to sort of stay with me on this one because it has helped me over time. But when I first had it, it was worse because it was all the time. Mm-hmm. It felt like this thing was trying to reject itself from my body.
Wow.
Is the only way I can describe it. And that was a tough time. So that probably was around about 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of settled and started getting better. And I still was having the symptoms, but they were easing. And the bleeding, a lot of people have Mirena coil and they just don't get a period at all. Right. I still do. And it is really frustrating because I get a really long period. And I don't think any woman wants to be on a period, do they? So mine will be 10 days minimum, sometimes 14 days. But it's manageable. It's not heavy, so I can control it. I don't feel out of control. I can wear what I want. I don't have to carry all that, extra clothing and things around with.
Do you feel that the whole cycle is more regulated now? So do you know when to expect things?
Definitely, yeah. Obviously, it's I'm on my period a lot more than I would want to be, but yes, I know more when it's going to happen. In terms of the pain, I probably almost don't get that classic period pain anymore, that sort of cramping and release. What I do still get is the more painful symptoms that you associate with endometriosis, which is the between period pain. Mm-hmm. So I actually had it yesterday morning before we were due to record some more of the podcast series. And luckily I nipped it in the bud quite early. So I had my painkillers. I got back into bed with a hot water bottle for half an hour, and that was able to mean I could carry on with my day. It does really fatigue me. So that's another symptom of endometriosis, is fatigue, because of the drain really from the pain that it causes. So I was really, really worn out by the end of a busy day, but just so pleased that I could get through the busy day. So that probably is now happening maybe 2 to 3 days a month, maybe that sort of type of pain. But the difference is that I can manage it if I get on it early.
Because there'll be still some people listening thinking, crikey, that's still a few days a month plus a 14-day period that you're still living with.
Yeah.
But for you, that's significant change from what you were living before.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about, Charlotte, is that it talks about women of reproductive age. So what happens with endometriosis with women through menopause? Do you know much about that yet, or have you been advised as to what will happen with perimenopause and menopause?
I don't know a lot about it, and it's an interesting point because you sort of don't stay in the system. Once you've been treated, you're back out of the system again.
Right.
I fully anticipate probably having to go back with some problems at a later date. I also can't talk to my mum because she went into false menopause because of having everything removed when she was 33. So I've sort of that experience that I had that we could share. I'm sort of gone beyond that now, so I don't quite know how it's going to look. I know that it can still affect you even after menopause because of the fact that I've not just got that tissue in my womb lining, it's all over the place now.
Right.
So that pain that it has caused, those cysts, that it's caused, that scarring,
will stay there.
I'm still going to have that pain.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Likely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Charlotte, if people are listening and thinking some of this stuff sounds familiar, or my periods are significantly worse than I thought they should be, or my friends or my social group, is there anything you would want them to take away from listening to your advice that you would say, symptoms, things to look out for, things that they should be doing?
Yeah. So if in terms of sort of the symptoms you need to be aware of, it is painful periods, but it's also painful ovulation, pelvic pain any time of the month. So not just, with your period. Heavy and sometimes prolonged periods.
Right.
Something I haven't talked about is the fact that it can be painful during and after sex as well is something to look out for. Painful bowel movements, as I mentioned, happens to me. Fatigue, and obviously some people struggling with infertility as well. So they are the main symptoms. In terms of sort of managing it, so something I have to do, when my pain kicks in, I need to address it really quickly. If I start walking around the house looking for painkillers, it's almost like that pain explodes.
Okay.
And it can just get so much worse, escalate so quickly. So I have painkillers everywhere. Obviously, if you've got young children around, you need to have them hidden away. But they are in nearly every room in my house. I have them in every bag because if I do not want to be caught when I'm out and about with it, because I need to take some painkillers really quickly. Just talking to friends, talking to family so that they know what to expect. They know that you don't want to let them down if you can't, make an engagement that you've arranged. And I think also if you've got, if you are struggling with the heavy periods, it's really hard to talk about. It's not something that women, it's a bit disgusting, to feel that. But having those changes of clothes with you, just to give you that confidence that you've got to change, I think can just psychologically make that feel so much better. So there is things like I have learned over the years, and hot water bottles are your friend. So I never go away without a hot water bottle. Whether it's popping to my mum and dad's, overnight, or going. I took one to Crete when I went in the summer. I mean,
in a heat wave,
it's 40 degrees, but I need to have it there for pain relief. So making sure, that you've always got that to hand.
Charlotte, if people were looking for more information or organisations, are there particular organisations or websites or experts that have been particularly helpful for you that you would signpost people to?
Endometriosis UK has got loads of information on, and it's got stories of other sufferers, because endometriosis can be different for everyone. Not everyone. Some people will chime in with the symptoms I've described, and for other people it will be quite a sort of a different story, and it might be more about the journey with infertility as well. So that there's loads of sort of stories on there, and just to make you feel like you're not alone, you're not coping with this alone. So that's a really useful site.
Great, and we'll signpost that in the details for today's podcast so that people have got somewhere to go as a reference point. Charlotte, thank you. And I'm sorry that I feel very guilty that in our modern world, this is still a taboo subject, that women aren't talking about this particular condition, and because it's so personal. And thank you for sharing your experiences. And I'm sorry that it's emotional as well, because I think it has obviously had such a massive impact on your life and your adulthood that it's sort of borne its emotional scars for you as well. But I appreciate you airing that with us, because I'm sure there are people listening going, actually, I feel more equipped now to go and ask the question. And I must say, one of the takeaways for me has been your diary, that you kept that record so that you've got that evidence, so that if somebody asks you to remember, that you can actually remember, and it doesn't all sort of merge into one memory. So thank you so much for joining us on our Family Health podcast today. We've been talking to Charlotte about her endometriosis, and there are more information available in the notes from today's podcast. If you would like to watch the podcast, some people like to watch us. We did brush our hair specially. It's available to watch on our YouTube channel. Please do share this podcast via social media. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, you can do that that via social media or via our regular channels. And if there are topics that you would like us to talk about, if there are family health topics that you would like Family Health Podcast to cover, please get in touch, because we are building now our next series of guests. So we would love your input into what you are looking to listen to. So you've been listening to Family Health by Mini First Aid. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Family Health by Mini First Aid. I hope you found our podcast really useful and informative. If you want to know more about Mini First Aid classes, courses, qualification courses or first aid supplies, please do visit minifirstaid.co.uk or look us up on all your favourite social platforms at Mini First Aid. As you care for your family's well-being, remember that Unity Mutual believes in enriching lives beyond pounds and pence and is here to support both their health and financial future. Choose Unity Mutual for your junior ISA and you'll not only invest in their dreams but also receive a free mini first aid class. Thanks to Unity Mutual for making it all possible. Until next time, stay informed and financially secure, knowing that your journey with Unity Mutual is about more than just money. It's about nurturing your future and protecting your loved ones every step of the way.